On that note, we begin today with a broadcast exclusive interview with Ian Haworth. Ian was on a college campus this week from my own hometown to talk about how free speech is being destroyed on college campuses. It is not being respected, to put it mildly. That is, before he was interrupted and shut down by angry protesters. Ian is a columnist for the Washington Examiner and host of Off Limits, and he joins me now. Look, you did the tough thing during COVID. You paid your people and pulled your business through the pandemic. And now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. Government funds are available to reward companies with 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. This is not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. The program's complicated, but no one knows more about it than the CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work and then share a percentage of the cash they get you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans, even if you had increases in sales. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID. Let covidtaxrelief.org help get you up to $26,000 per employee. Visit covidtaxrelief.org. That's covidtaxrelief.org, covidtaxrelief.org. Ian, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you go to SUNY Albany. That is where my dad taught for many years of my young life. That's why we moved from Syracuse to Albany, so he could take that job. I grew up a stone's throw from there in a small suburb called Delmar for my middle school and high school years. And I'm appalled at how the people in this university that my dad loved behaved. It was absolutely disgusting. So before we roll the tape, set it up for us. Why were you there?
Well, I was there, ironically, to speak about the merits of free speech and why free speech is dying on campus. And so honestly, if you were trying to demonstrate exactly what I was warning about, you couldn't have planned it any better. So ironic, but really, really sad to see, as you said.
So you go to speak about free speech, and were you there on behalf of Turning Point USA or with TPUSA?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I was invited by the Turning Point USA chapter at the University of Albany.
So do you think that was what flagged for them that you'd be a fun person to protest?
Yeah, I think it's one of many things. One is obviously there's a lot of attention around TPUSA because they dare to go on college campuses and speak vague truths sometimes. And people on the left don't tend to like that on campus. But there's also the idea that I'm a transphobe. I think a lot of people saw signs with my face on it, did a very, very quick Google search, and saw that I, for example, support biological reality and I oppose the mutilation of children. And that really is all it took to set people off. I think the transgender issue is what they claim to be at the center of this protest. I think a lot of it is they simply don't like any idea that goes against theirs. And this is just one of many examples that we're seeing on college campuses today.
Sometimes it seems to me they don't know what they're protesting. They want to be like the civil rights protesters, but they really have no beef. So they show up there and they chant some vague slogan and somehow they feel powerful. You got up there, tried to speak to, who invited you? Like what group were you speaking to?
It was the Turning Point USA group.
Okay, so it was that chapter on the college campus. So they're there. And how many people were in the room, would you say?
Oh, I'd say well over 100. It was packed to capacity. I think they were worried about the fire code at one point. But it was also hard to know how many were protesters and how many people were there, not who necessarily agreed with me, but just wanted to hear me speak and ask questions. The Q&A is always the fun bit once I'm done talking. And I'm very open and ask people who disagree with me to come forward and ask questions. And so there are a lot of people there hoping to actually engage in debate. I got a lot of messages afterwards of people apologizing for the behavior, but also saying how disappointed they were that they couldn't actually engage in the debate that I think is so sorely needed.
Mm-hmm. So this is just a bit of video of what happened to you by these so-called activists who tried to shut you down. I'm sorry, just an anecdotal observation, but why are the people who do this almost universally unattractive? I'm sorry, but it's true.
Well, I think that what's so strange is that they all rely on just either empty threats or really ad hominem attacks, nothing else. There was no substance. The only thing that was even vaguely ideological was the fact they were saying trans rights are human rights, but no one could explain what trans rights are. Honestly, like, I think the funniest chant was no cops, no KKK, no TPUSA, when I'm a Jewish immigrant, and I don't think the KKK are exactly falling over themselves to invite me to be in any way affiliated with them. And so there was just no basis to truth in anything they said, but it was just all fueled by anger. But also, if we're all Nazis, as they say we are, they didn't exactly pause when they were shoveling the pizza provided by TPUSA down their throats. And so really there was no basis of reality to anything they were pushing. It was just children having a tantrum. And I think it says a lot about really the college environment that they are allowed to behave this way and get away with it. I don't think anything is actually going to happen from this. It's just another example of shutting down free speech. And in some ways they were successful.
I'm sorry. Some of those people could have used a break from pizza. They did not need extra calories. I'm just going to call it out. Like, it's universal. They're always unattractive. They're bitter. It's the same people who are the masked Nazis who wanted us to cover up our faces forever. And they're working out their issues on people like you who are trying to spark good faith debates on very difficult issues, which is exactly how we historically have worked through those issues. I understand that in addition to their pizza shoveling, they decided it might be a good idea to burn or tear a Bible. What did they do to the Bible?
Yeah, so one of the TPUSA members had a Bible with them, and one of the protesters decided to tear it up because that's what free speech means to them. I think it just shows really at the core of it, they don't care about free speech. This is just about bullying people off campus. Again, destruction of property is a crime, but I doubt anything will happen here. One can only imagine what would happen if it was, say, a different religion and their prayer books were being torn up. I think it just demonstrates so many levels right now.
Right. If something had happened to the Quran, can you imagine? We've seen that in the past. They say students attended the event as a peaceful demonstration of queer solidarity and joy, and that their rights to free speech were denied when authorities later removed them so the event could continue. That they were the ones disenfranchised, Ian, once the authorities said, get out.
I mean, it's just the victim card, isn't it? Is that they present themselves as victims because they're victims of speech. Speech and violence are merged together so they can use really violent threats, violent actions to defend themselves supposedly against speech. And then when consequences come down upon them, as they do for any adult behaving this way, then suddenly they're the victims. They fundamentally don't really know what free speech is, but even if they did, they do not care. It doesn't matter what kind of person I am. It doesn't actually matter whether or not any of their accusations of me are true or false. Anyone who is invited by a college chapter to a public school specifically as well has the right to speak. And they don't have to listen. They certainly have the right to protest. I actually supported their right to protest. I think it's great that anyone is engaged in the political space with any passion. The problem is when they try to use the heckler's veto to really threaten people, bully people into not speaking, into not hearing other ideas. That's when they cross the line.
Did you try to speak at the microphone and this is what you were met with?
No, actually, we were talking about that. I was backstage this whole time listening to one of the many glorious insults that I've heard better ones since I was 5 years old, honestly. So it wasn't all that offensive. But we were speaking with the law enforcement there and various administration. They didn't want me to go out because they just thought it would rile people up more. They were trying to calm the situation down. But really, the horse had bolted on that issue. I've been in other college campuses where protests have tried to happen. University of New Mexico is a clear example where they had a lot of protection before the speech. And that's really what you've got to do. Once you've got people dancing a conga line around the room, spitting in people's faces, all these kind of things, you can't really bring that back. And so the horse had bolted. I think it was quite clear that the speech wasn't going to go ahead in that room. And so we were forced to go to a different room under police escort and police protection during the second event, which was just ridiculous. This has to happen on a college campus in the United States. It's just absurd.
How many security guards did it take to get this thing under control ultimately?
I don't actually know. It wasn't that many. We only, I think, had, I would say under a dozen police officers in the end. I certainly wasn't sufficient. I think questions need to be asked of the college in terms of preparation and looking forward to the future, this happening elsewhere. Because if things had gotten more out of hand, I'm not sure there were enough people to really hold it back. And that's the danger here. It's very easy for me. I fly in, I give a speech, and then I was out the next day. But a lot of these conservative students, not even conservative, students who just want to engage, they are these people's neighbors. They shared dorm rooms and dorm buildings with these people. they're under threat every single day. We had multiple people on the chapter in the chapter reaching out to me saying they've been threatened online, that they were harassed after the event. This is an ongoing problem. It's all very well talking about the videos that get a lot of attention on social media, but this is an ongoing daily reality for so many people on college, and it needs to get really addressed.
In a minute, Dennis Prager is going to come on. We're going to talk about what just happened to Riley Gaines, the swimmer who came in. She tied Leah Thomas at the NCAA event, and what just happened to her was similar, only I dare say even worse. She was physically assaulted, say Riley and her team. This university, again, SUNY Albany, again, you point out taxpayer funded. I mean, my mom still lives in the state of New York. That's my mother's tax dollars paying for them to shout you down. And on behalf of my mother, I think I can safely say we object. I grew up my whole life in New York. This is absolutely disgusting. And New York has got a healthy collection, by the way, of conservatives in it. Both upstate New York is more red-leaning, Staten Island, Long Island. It's not all, and Western New York is more right-leaning. This is not a universally blue town. And so how dare they just drown out the voices of half the state? That's why New York used to have Republican governors. So the university is saying, in a statement given to Fox News, we expect members of our community to be able to voice their views in a manner that promotes constructive dialogue and honors the University of Albany's commitment to freedom of expression. That to me sounds like a box check, right? Like, okay, we want to honor the commitment to freedom of expression. They go on to say, we are equally committed to fostering an environment in which all students feel safe and included, and that the right to protest is also protected. What do you make of that, Ian? To me, it sounds like weak sauce.
Yes. I mean, they're also making a strong argument. No one is arguing against their right to protest. That was never the issue. No one, as part of the TPUSA chapter, and certainly not me, said that these people should not be protesting. Many of them welcomed it. Many of them thought it was good that we were actually engaging in a debate on an important issue. And so I think the college is engaging in a lot of the protesters' rhetoric by claiming that they are under threat, that they don't feel safe. Words do not make you feel unsafe when you're just talking about a political issue, and certainly not someone who's really not that controversial. People seem to think I'm an evil, transphobic, hateful person. I'm really not. If you actually listen to a lot of my speeches, I've talked in favor of compassion for a lot of transgender people in this political issue. But again, it doesn't matter. This isn't about making people feel safe. It's really about, as you said, ticking the box so that these protesters won't push any harder. And a lot of these colleges are being held hostage by these students. And that needs to change. Otherwise, they're just being rewarded for this. If they can get away with shutting down speech, making people feel uncomfortable, we're talking about feeling safe. Do you think these conservative students on campus feel safe? I don't think so.
Right. What about them? Right, exactly right. So was there a dean, we saw in the Stanford protest, there was that dean who got up and tried to lecture the judge about, is the juice worth the squeeze? Was there any sort of faculty presence here trying to rein in these protesters?
There were a couple of members. I didn't really get to speak to them. They were working with TPUSA and law enforcement. But again, they didn't really do much. We talked a couple of times about, were they they asked me if I wanted to move rooms. I said, not really. I don't want to move anywhere. I don't want to really give an inch to these people. Eventually, we were forced to under advisement of law enforcement. But beyond trying to find solutions, the solution was removing the students who were being disruptive. In my mind, that was the solution, but it was quite clear they didn't want to do that. And I think that's, again, the issue is that conservatives and people in the middle who just want to engage in discussion always have to make a step back. And that just encourages the people who are being violent, the people who are being aggressive to keep stepping forward. That's the issue. Moving to another room, yes, solves it in the short term, but half the people left because they felt under threat. And I understand quite considerably why they felt under threat. People were spitting in their faces, swearing at them, flipping them off. It was really awful to watch. And so the damage was done. Like, they achieved their goal. And so having the speech carry on afterwards is good, yes. But again, they achieved their ultimate mission, was to shut down speech and to limit the distribution of that speech. And if that doesn't change, then I don't see this issue I see this issue growing, and we'll see it on more campuses every single day.
As we are. You could hear some of the profanity, some of the vulgarity, just the classless base behavior that these people were engaging in. I'm glad that, unlike in some instances, you finally were able to speak. But by that point, as you point out, some of your people who wanted to hear you had gone home. They were under threat. The event was not what it was meant to be. Now, here's the perfect irony. I mean, it's perfect, Ian. Now, these students are upset. This is from the Daily Mail. After quoting a number of rules in the student handbook they claimed were violated in the removal of themselves, these dancing and screaming students from this lecture, the group demanded that the university install a number of gender-affirming measures. Here we go. Here it is. They also asked that any pictures or videos of them at the protest be removed from the internet. So on that note, let's please run the video again so we can get yet another look at these whiny babies who put themselves out there and now don't want their faces and bodies seen for very clear reasons. We'll put it on the screen again. Let's watch it one more time so that these children can understand the consequences of their actions. Nice. Tomorrow's leaders, I'm sure. I mean, who would hire people like this? These are people who are going to be going out into the workforce in the not too distant future. And even in the face of this behavior, want to paint themselves the victims, Ian.
Well, I don't think we have to worry about them going to the workforce. I'm not sure they're really qualified for much except doing this and eating pizza and screaming about it. But again, just the fact that they say this is what queer rage looks like. This is what queer joy looks like. They're very proud of it when they feel like they're safe, when they're behind the shield of the campus or the shield of the situation. But the moment someone shines even the smallest light on their behavior, they're embarrassed. They want to really recede back into the shadows. They want to claim themselves to be a victim. You can't have both. Either you enter the public space and you engage in this behavior and you have to face the consequences. I was told by the TPUSA chapter that one of the students that was arrested slapped a cop. Like, there are consequences for what you do in life. And if you assault a police officer, that's going to come with consequences. These people are just children who have been coddled into the idea that they can do quite literally whatever they want. I mean, ultimately, we've seen Democrats endorse burning down cities and being called mostly peaceful. So I'm not really surprised that people are describing this as peaceful. The whole notion of peace doesn't really have any real definition anymore. But again, they're just children who are used to getting away with anything. And when someone even gives them the smallest slap on the wrist, they really quiver in fear. They just can't quite believe it.
This reminds me of one of the protests at Northwestern. It was either undergrad or law school, and it was a member of the Bush administration who went to speak there. And all these people came out to protest and shut the person down. It might have been Condi Rice. I'm trying to test my memory. And they went to try to shut down the speech and protested. And the journalism school at Northwestern, that's what it was. It was Medill, went out there, covered the protests, did interviews with people, took shots of people who were out there doing the protest. And then they complained that they were being photographed and that their pictures were in the newspaper and that the quotes they gave actual journalists trying to document the event were used in the newspaper. And Medill, the journalism school at Northwestern, backed down, apologized. They were sorry that they put the people's public behavior out in front of the public eye. I mean, the infantile mentality that we are dealing with here needs to be absolutely eradicated. No one can take the knee. They need to be fought. They need to be defeated. This is absolutely disgusting behavior, and that's why I'm glad you stood up to them. I'm glad you ultimately did get to give some remarks to some people who were there, and happy to have hosted you this morning so that we can get the good word out. Thank you for fighting the good fight.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Unbelievable.